Germany's loss to Paraguay did not just end their World Cup. It may have broken the dressing room. Reports now claim several German players are blaming Julian Nagelsmann for the collapse, with some even calling for him to step down, and the details are starting to get ugly. Let me catch you up. Germany, four-time World Cup winners, are out of the 2026 edition of the tournament after a shocking defeat against Paraguay, with the South American side winning 4-3 after the penalty shootout, following a tense 1-1 draw over 120 minutes at Gillette Stadium. Let that sink in. Not France, not Brazil, Paraguay. A team ranked 10th in the world, eliminated by the 41st ranked side, and that's the kind of result that necessitates major changes. The side coached by Nagelsmann struggled to dominate the match against Paraguay's disciplined defense, and the South Americans scored before halftime when Julio Enciso notched the opening goal, giving Paraguay a surprise 1-0 lead. Germany, with all their talent, with Musiala and Wirtz and Havertz on the pitch, couldn't break down a team that had scraped through the group stage. As one of the 8 best third-place finishers, they had nearly 80% possession in the first half, but couldn't register a single shot on goal, whereas Paraguay needed just 20% of the ball to find the net. Germany responded after halftime with a Kai Havertz header from Florian Wirtz's cross to level the score at 1-1, and for a moment, it felt like the machine had clicked into gear. Germany controlled the game from that point and pushed relentlessly for a winner, but goalkeeper Orlando Gil produced several important saves to keep Paraguay alive in regular time. Then came the moment that sent Nagelsmann into a fury. Germany had a Jonathan Tah header controversially ruled out by VAR in extra time. After a VAR review, the goal was ruled out because Waldemar Anton was judged to have impeded the Paraguay goalkeeper, preventing him from making a save. Nagelsmann called it a scandal on live television. His players looked like they'd been punched in the stomach, and then came the penalties. Havertz, Nick Woltemade, and Jonathan Tah all missed from the spot to send the 4-time winners, who haven't won a knockout game since lifting the trophy in 2014, home early again. Manuel Neuer kept Germany's hopes alive by saving a key penalty after Tony Sanabria's miss, sending the shootout into sudden death. But Tah's mistake, skying his attempt over the goal, proved decisive, allowing Jose Canale to convert the winning penalty. 3 spot kicks missed, 1 game, 1 exit. Germany have never before lost a World Cup penalty shootout, until now. And in the dressing room aftermath, with boots still on, and the silence still hanging in the air, the Germany players started talking. Not all of them publicly, but enough. And what they said, or didn't say, about their head coach paints a picture that the DFB cannot ignore. Fabrizio Romano broke the news within minutes of the final whistle dropping. Nagelsmann had come out swinging. "I am not resigning. If the DFB want me to stay until 2028, I will. If they don't, then I'll leave this project." But that statement didn't land the way Nagelsmann intended, because the players, Germany's own players, had already started speaking. And what they were saying was painting a very different picture of a camp that is deeply fractured, deeply frustrated, and increasingly tired of a coach who has been bending them into shapes they don't fit. Nagelsmann's job is in question after his side suffered a shock penalty, shootout defeat to Paraguay in the round of 32 of the World Cup. And the pressure isn't just coming from the outside, it's coming from within. Here's what makes this situation so charged. It's not just pundits ripping into Nagelsmann from their TV studios, which they absolutely are. It's not just the German press going to town on the tactics, which they absolutely are doing. It's the players themselves, the men who were out on that pitch on Monday, who have stepped in front of the microphones and, whether deliberately or not, thrown their head coach into the fire. Start with Joshua Kimmich, one of the most experienced voices in the German dressing room, a man who has played under some of the sharpest coaching minds in European football. Kimmich offered a brutally honest assessment of the team's performance. He didn't mince words, he didn't deflect. "We simply took too long to get our wing play going. As the game went on, we tried to force it more and ended up creating more situations in the box," Kimmich said. Words that, read carefully, are a direct indictment of the system Nagelsmann built for that match. Because the wing play wasn't slow, because the players were slow. It was slow because the formation made it structurally impossible to be anything else. Then there's Manuel Neuer, Germany's captain, a man who has won everything this game has to offer. His verdict after the final whistle? Neuer slammed Germany's performance. Not gently, not diplomatically, he came out and said directly that Germany simply have to win a game like this. That's the captain of the team publicly acknowledging that what happened in Foxborough was not good enough. Not the VAR, not the shootout. The entire performance, and by extension, the setup Nagelsmann put in place. Kai Havertz, who scored Germany's equalizer and then missed. The first penalty of the shootout had a moment in front of the cameras that told its own story. According to reports, he was speechless after the exit, saying, "My second World Cup messed it up twice." That's not the language of a player defending his manager. That's the language of a player who feels like opportunities have been squandered and who is beginning to ask why. Nadim Amiri described the squad as very disappointed and shocked after the exit. And Havertz himself was quick to acknowledge that the players have to take responsibility, saying, "We play for such a big country. Us players have to take the responsibility." That line is interesting, because when a player says we have to take responsibility, in the context of a loss this damaging, there's an implicit understanding that somebody else isn't being held accountable. And everyone in that press conference room knew who he was talking about. Nagelsmann, for his part, also blamed his players for the overall performance, saying the build-up play had been too slow. So you've got the manager blaming the players, and the players, in their body language, in their words, in their silences, pushing back. That's a dressing room that is not pulling in the same direction. And when a squad falls apart at a tournament, that fracture doesn't happen overnight. It builds slowly, through weeks of tactical frustration, through training sessions where the system doesn't click, through substitutions that arrive too late, and selections that leave players confused about their roles. Of the criticism Nagelsmann has received during his time at the helm has been his stubborn attitude, forcing systems and players that are not working, which has led to Germany playing like a group of individuals, rather than a cohesive team, and the players felt every minute of that. Tonight, some of them said so. To understand why the Germany dressing room is cracking, you have to understand what Nagelsmann actually asked his players to do against Paraguay, because it reads like a case study in how not to set up a World Cup knockout team. The system Nagelsmann started the game with was an asymmetrical 4-2-3-1, with Joshua Kimmich inverting to create a pseudo back three, while Nathaniel Brown tucked inside as an extra wide midfielder. Florian Wirtz and Leroy Sané hugged the touchlines as wingers, and the two strikers were given a free role in the middle. It just did not work. Think about that for a second. Florian Wirtz, one of the most technically gifted players Germany has produced in a generation, a natural number 10, a player whose whole game is built around operating between the lines with freedom, was being asked to hug a touchline as a winger. Wirtz is a natural number 10, and yet he was being forced to play on the left. It's like buying a Stradivarius violin and using it to prop open a door. The talent is there. The deployment is criminal. And Wirtz wasn't alone in being misused. Leroy Sané played as the sole source of width on the right. For much of the game, he was unable to beat his man or land a successful cross. Being a black hole in possession meant that Paraguay could comfortably focus their efforts elsewhere. Meanwhile, Alexander Pavlovich and Felix Nmeka didn't function together as a pivot. They got in each other's way, and with both fullbacks inverting, the midfield became too crowded for them to operate. The obvious fix, moving Kimmich into midfield, where he's one of the best in the world, took Nagelsmann until the second half to implement. It was only when Kimmich was finally moved to the middle, with Musiala taking Sané's place on the right, that Germany looked like a half-decent team. It's a shame it came too late. And the goalkeeper situation. It's been a talking point since Nagelsmann named the squad. Manuel Neuer did not ruin his legacy, but he did put a major dent on it with this World Cup. Jonas Erbig had proven he can do the job with Bayern Munich. He should have been handed the reins. He may not have saved the goals Neuer conceded, but his passing range and accuracy would have added a new dimension to the setup. Nagelsmann chose loyalty over pragmatism, and it cost Germany a dimension they desperately needed when things got tight. Then there's the squad selection question. Why was Tom Bischoff left at home? He could have slotted into the role Goretzka played at the end of the game, and likely done a better job. He also has a knack for scoring from range, which could have been invaluable when Germany had no ideas for a breakthrough. And there was no pace on the squad, said El Mala of FC Cologne. Couldn't have been a godsend in the dying minutes, when Paraguay were starting to look gassed. Nagelsmann had insisted on leaving top scorer Deniz Undav on the bench at the start of all 3 group matches, despite the forward having scored 3 times and delivered 2 assists as a substitute in this tournament. You don't leave your most clinical finisher on the bench in a knockout game. You just don't. Personnel did not cause this elimination for Germany. Tactical and selection decisions made by the coach were the main culprit, and the players knew it. Some of them said it carefully, diplomatically, in the way that players always do when they're trying. Not to publicly indict their manager, but the message was there. For anyone paying attention, none of this came out of nowhere. The cracks in the Nagelsmann-Germany relationship didn't appear. The moment the penalty shootout ended in Foxborough, they'd been there for months, visible to anyone who was watching, building like pressure behind a dam. Germany came into the World Cup on a 9-match winning run, demolishing Curaçao 7-1 in their Group E opener before snatching a stoppage-time win against Ivory Coast to secure top spot. They had suffered first-round exits in 2018 and 2022 and looked set for a 12th straight win before a shock 2-1 loss to Ecuador in their last group match snapped their streak and instantly raised alarm bells. After a stellar run of 11 consecutive victories, Germany were brought back down to earth with a thud, following that defeat to Ecuador in their final group outing. The result sparked a wave of criticism across Germany, with fans and pundits alike questioning Nagelsmann's tactical choices and squad rotation. The defeat, while having no consequences, having sealed top spot, piled instant pressure on Nagelsmann, who had repeatedly said before the tournament that the goal was to win the title. You said you're here to win it all, then you lose to Ecuador. The German public does not forget things like that. And then came the press conference, the one that former Germany international Marcus Babbel labeled a petulant child moment. Nagelsmann reacted angrily to a question after Germany's loss to Ecuador. When first asked what needed to improve for the next stage, he said a lot, but I'm not discussing that with you. Asked if the team were too complacent having already qualified, Nagelsmann responded, "Please stop with this nonsense. Honestly, didn't they want to give it their all?" That led to Babbel labeling him a petulant child. That's not the behavior of a coach who has the room with him. That's a coach who has become defensive, who feels the walls closing in, who is reacting to pressure rather than managing it. And his players were watching every one of those press conferences. They saw how their manager handled adversity. They saw him lash out at journalists, push blame around, and then emerge from the training ground the next day, insisting he had nothing to prove. He had also been criticized at home for sticking to a specific lineup, despite some players still out of form, including Musiala and Wirtz. There's a very particular kind of frustration that sets in when a player knows they're not performing at their best, knows the system isn't working, and yet watches their manager insist on running it back again and again and again. Musiala, one of the genuinely elite players on that roster, was dropped for Deniz Undav against Paraguay. Undav came into the starting lineup while Musiala was left out, without any radical changes to the setup. Nagelsmann has coached a Germany side that is bogged down by friction. The moving parts don't fit together right. They scrape against each other on contact. Even when they're winning, this Germany team is uncomfortable to watch. You just know that something isn't right. Since the veterans left after Euro 2024, the team has lacked cohesion and vision. And that cohesion problem comes from the top. It comes from a coach who is making decisions that don't make sense to the players, who are supposed to execute them, who is putting talent in the wrong positions, who is making substitutions too late, and who is then deflecting accountability when it all goes wrong. After failing to get past the group stage in 2018 and 2022, Germany were playing in their first knockout game in 12 years, and they blew it. Against a team ranked 41st in the world, at a tournament they came into as genuine contenders. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens when a squad has been built wrong, prepared wrong, and deployed wrong. And the players, sitting in that dressing room in Foxborough, know exactly where the decisions came from. So Nagelsmann comes out after the game and does a live interview, and he's defiant, completely, unapologetically, combustibly defiant. He told ZDF, "It's a scandal that he gave the free kick. It's a complete scandal. There are games you have to win dirty, and we would have won that dirty." Asked if he was considering walking away, he replied, "I'm not resigning. If the DFB want me to stay until 2028, I will. If they don't, then I'll leave this project. I am not one to shy away." That last line. I am not one to shy away. A man standing in the wreckage of a World Cup exit to Paraguay, a man whose tactical decisions have been publicly unpicked by analysts and quietly condemned by players, and his response is to essentially dare the DFB to fire him. Despite suggesting he knows some supporters want him to quit, the former Bayern Munich boss said he will not run away. "If the DFB want me, I'm going to continue. I know a lot of people want me to leave, but I would love to continue if the DFB want me. I'll give my arguments to my boss." If there was a survey today in Germany, people aren't going to talk about me positively, obviously. That last admission is telling he knows the public have turned on him. He knows the media have turned on him. And he knows, even if he won't say it outright, that many of his own players have questions about the direction he's taking the squad. But he's not going quietly. He's planting his flag and waiting for the DFB to make the move. Nagelsmann said, "If you exit after the first stage, it's not enough for German football. This is now the third elimination in a row, so we are not part of the first-class teams anymore. 3 tournaments, 3 early exits, and Nagelsmann is responsible for one of them directly. Now the DFB faces its own impossible calculation." Nagelsmann has stated plainly that he will not resign from his position and intends to remain in charge through 2028 as long as the German Football Association wants him there. A second extension in January 2025 pushed his contract all the way through Euro 2028. That contract extension is going to cost the DFB money if they want out. And the sporting director, Rudi Völler, has publicly backed his man, describing Nagelsmann as the right person in the right place, even after tonight's elimination. But can that position hold? The post-mortem after this tournament will not be kind to Nagelsmann's side. "Probably we need to do a big change. We will see." The former Bayern Munich coach himself said, "We need some solutions for the future. I won't go into details today, but there are some things that need to be changed." That's Nagelsmann admitting, in the same breath as insisting he's staying, that the project needs an overhaul. But who changes it? Him? Under him? With the same players who've been publicly airing their frustration. And then there's the Jurgen Klopp question floating around in the background. It's the conversation that certain sections of German football Twitter simply cannot help themselves from having. There is a high chance that Klopp could be tempted by the Germany job, the only one that could convince him to opt out of his current role with Red Bull. His role as head of global soccer for Red Bull is lucrative and less demanding, which explains why he reportedly turned down Real Madrid, Chelsea, and a host of others. The Germany job, though, that's different. That's blood. This type of defeat is something that will haunt Nagelsmann. Germans were ready to see their country play France in the round of 16. Going out to Paraguay is a shock loss. That is only marginally better than being grouped out. And the players who were on that pitch tonight, the ones who have given years of their careers to wearing that white shirt, are the ones who will carry this moment with them. While Paraguay move on, the fallout for Germany begins now. The DFB has a decision to make. Nagelsmann has drawn his line. The players have spoken, some loudly, some quietly, all of them in a way that raises serious questions about whether this group can rebuild under the same coach who just broke them. This type of defeat is something that will haunt Nagelsmann. Germans were ready to see their country play France in the round of 16. Going out to Paraguay is a shock loss. That is only marginally better than being grouped. Germany have Nations League fixtures ahead. Euro 2028 is the target on the horizon. But between now and then, there's an entire reckoning to get through. Players who feel misused. A coaching staff that doubled down on decisions until it was too late to change them. And a head coach standing at a microphone in Massachusetts, refusing to go anywhere, daring the organization that employs him to make the call. He won't make himself. The dressing room has spoken. The question now is, who in Frankfurt is listening. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.